Welcome back to the deep dive. This is where we really get into the weeds, crack open those complex source materials so you don't have to.
Exactly.
And today, we're definitely strapping in for some pretty advanced stuff. We're moving beyond just basic prompts.
Yeah, way beyond. We're getting into the core mechanics of how these generative AI models actually work, especially for editing.
Right. So the focus today, based on our sources, excerpts from Advanced Magic 101 Creepy Bits by Zano, it's all about getting, surgical precision.
Surgical non-destructive precision, that's the goal. We're shifting really from just being users, hitting generate.
To being engineers of the output.
Yeah.
Understanding how it works.
Mm-hmm. That shift from just making images to actually controlling them precisely. That's the big thing now.
It really is. I mean, for years, just getting anything usable from a text prompt felt like a huge win, right?
Absolutely. Coherent, maybe beautiful. That was the victory.
But now the demand is just so much higher. People want, really granular control over images that already exist. They want to tweak the composition without breaking it.
And the industry's responding. Our sources mention some impressive tools like Black Forest Labs Flux Context.
Oh, yeah. And Alibaba's Quinn Image Edit 2509. Those are the big specialized systems.
Highly optimized, yeah. Designed to handle really complex changes pretty seamlessly.
But, those are the polished apps, the finished magic wands, so to speak.
Right.
What we want to do here on this deep dive is kind of put those down and open the spellbook itself.
Look at the schematics, not just the finished machine.
Exactly. We want to understand the fundamental technique, the core thing that lets this new generation of editing work so precisely.
And that core technique, the real engine behind it, is DDIM Inversion.
Okay, DDIM Inversion. Let's unpack that. But first, maybe let's frame the problem, the pain point everyone hits.
Good idea, because everyone has hit it.
Yeah, if you've ever tried to edit an AI image, you run right into this frustrating compromise. It's always this battle, isn't it? Between keeping the original image's structure.
The fidelity.
Yeah.
Like the pose, the lighting, the whole composition.
And actually making a significant creative change. You want to change the style, say, photorealistic to watercolor.
Boom. You often just obliterate the subject's pose. It's gone.
Or you try to keep the pose locked down, but then the change you make is, well, it's subtle. Or it just looks pasted on. Poorly integrated.
That's the exact trade-off. And DDIM Inversion, that's the computational framework that promises to just eliminate it.
No more trade-off.
That's the idea. So our goal today is first, really get the theory behind it, and then break down the actual practical steps. It's a two-part workflow.
Right.
The sequence you need to follow that lets you make, massive changes, radical modifications.
While guaranteeing, you said.
Guaranteeing perfect, non-negotiable preservation of the original image's structure, its integrity.
All right. That sounds like the holy grail of AI image editing. So let's get into it.
Okay, but before we jump into the advanced magic, the DDIM stuff, we probably need to set a baseline, right? Why do we even need this?
Exactly. We need to understand why the standard tools fall short. What are their limits?
Because that context really highlights why DDIM inversion is, well, maybe a technical necessity for certain tasks.
It absolutely is. Those standard workflows, they trap you in that binary choice you mentioned. Fidelity or creativity. Pick one.
So let's start with the most common one. The first spell, as the source calls it, image to image. IMG to IMG.
Ah, yes, the compositional bulldozer. That's a pretty good name for it.
Because it's just inherently destructive, right?
By its very nature. The mechanism is straightforward. You give the AI your starting image, you give it a new prompt,
right.
And the AI basically it sandblasts the original, covers it in digital noise, wiping away the details.
Right.
Then it starts repainting, trying to match your new text prompt, starting from that noisy, halfway destroyed base. And the control we have over this destruction level.
It really all comes down to one single crucial slider. Denoising strength.
Ah, yes. Everyone who's used these tools knows that slider, usually 1.0 to 1.0.
That's the one. And that single dial is the entire point of compromise. It dictates the balance between keeping the original versus letting the AI run wild with the new prompt.
So low denoising strength means less destruction.
Right. The AI adds very little noise. It preserves the original data, respects the composition, the lighting, the textures that were already there.
But presumably it can't change much then.
Exactly. Now, Crank that slider up, high denoising strength.
Maximum noise, maximum
Back
destruction.
at it. Wipes the slate clean, basically. Gives the AI total freedom to follow the new prompt, but it forgets the original image structure.
The source material had a really good example of this, didn't it? The cat conundrum.
Yeah, it's a perfect illustration. Painful, but clear. The goal was to take this very specific image.
Describe the cat. It was quite unique.
Okay, so, photorealistic portrait. Young tortoiseshell cat. Really distinct split-colored face. Half gray tabby, half orange.
Looking right at the camera.
Yep, direct gaze. Resting on a soft, textured blanket. The task was simple. Change only the blanket color, make it a deep, velvety red, keep the cat exactly the same.
Okay, so let's walk through what happened as they turned up that denoising strength dial.
All right. Starting low, at 0.5 denoising strength.
What happens?
Well, the model is super faithful to the original cat. Markings, pose, composition perfect, rock solid.
But the blanket.
That's the problem. The model just doesn't have enough freedom to make a big change. The blanket might get, I don't know, a slightly reddish tint, maybe pinkish.
But not that deep, velvety red specified in the prompt.
Nope, not even close.
Okay, so we kept the cat's unique look, its DNA, but we failed the main task. Need more change, so more destruction.
Right, push it up. Let's say 0.8 noise.
Now what?
Now the prompt starts to bite. The blanket texture, the color, it starts shifting convincingly towards that deep red target.
Okay, progress. But. There's always a but with MG to IMG.
Here's the penalty. The AI's creativity, its focus on the new prompt, starts to eat away at the original details.
The cat.
The source says the cat starts losing its unique facial markings. That specific split color definition gets blurry. It's still recognizably a tortoiseshell cat.
But it's not that specific cat anymore. It's becoming generic.
Exact.
So if the whole point was preserving that cat's look, we've already failed at 0.8. The AI is basically saying, okay, red blanket, but you get a random tortie.
Pretty much. Now, what happens if they push it even further? Say 0.9 noise.
Uh-oh. I have a bad feeling about this.
Yeah, at 0.9, the trade-off becomes really obvious. Disaster territory. The original subject is described as almost gone.
Wow.
The general composition might still be there, kind of, like the cat's position, the camera angle, it holds on by a thread, but the cat itself, totally replaced.
Replaced with
A different cat. A darker one, apparently, that the model thought fit the photorealistic portrait idea and the red blanket better. The original image is just a ghost. A faint structural outline.
Okay, and the final step, maximum destruction. 1 point so noise.
Total obliteration. The original image input is completely ignored. Might as well not have provided it.
So the AI just reads the prompt.
Yep. Photorealistic portrait of a young tortoiseshell cat on a soft red textured blanket, and it just makes a brand new image from pure noise.
And the result?
Some stylized kitten, apparently, completely ignores the original pose, lighting, composition. It's just a text-to-image generation at that point.
Wow, that perfectly sums up the MD2 IMG problem, doesn't it?
It really does.
It forces this destructive choice. If you want a big change, turn the cat into a dog, put it on the moon, change the whole style, you have to crank the noise so high
that you destroy the very essence, the structure of the image you started with. You kill the pose to change the color.
So clearly not ideal if preserving that structure is important, which leads us to needing other methods.
Methods that can somehow separate the structure from the creative stuff.
Okay, so MG to MMG is too broad, too destructive if you want to keep the original composition intact. What's the next logical step people try? Spell 2.
Spell 2. Inpainting. The digital surgery gamble.
Right. This feels more precise, doesn't it? Instead of messing with the whole image, you just operate on a specific part.
Exactly. You draw a mask, a very precise mask, around the area you want to change in the cat example, just the blanket.
And the AI is supposed to only work inside that mask area.
Correct. The rest of the image acts like a frame, holding everything else in place. It's great for, small fixes. Removing a blemish, swapping an object on a table.
Seems perfect for the cat's blanket problem then. Just mask the blanket, tell it red blanket, done.
Right.
Great.
If only it were that simple. Here's the limitation, the gamble part.
Okay.
The AI, when it tries to fill in that masked area, it doesn't really understand the whole photograph. It doesn't grasp the image's, let's call it, holistic DNA.
What does it look at then?
Primarily, it's looking at the pixels right around the edge of the mask, the immediate neighborhood.
So it's using just that local information to guess what should go inside the hole.
Pretty much. It lacks that global understanding. It isn't analyzing the overall lighting of the scene or the deeper compositional structure. It's just focused on blending the edges.
I can see how that could lead to problems with integration,
Hmm.
especially for a big change.
Exactly. It often fails to make the new part feel like it truly belongs in the image, especially if you want a high-fidelity change that matches the rest of the scene's quality.
So, back to the cat example. They masked only the blanket, prompted for that soft red textured blanket. What happened?
The source described the result perfectly. Hope for the best.
Huh. Okay, not promising.
Well, it did introduce some red, so partial success maybe?
Right.
It totally failed to integrate the concept of a deep, velvety, uniformly red blanket. The output wasn't just red, it had big patches of gray and black mixed in.
Why gray and black?
Because it was trying too hard to blend with the cat's fur at the edges of the mask, it saw the gray and orange fur right next door and thought, oh, I should probably mix some of that in.
So it didn't understand the instruction was just for the blanket material itself.
Precisely. And crucially, the red that was there, it wasn't that rich, deep, velvety red they got in the destructive IMG to IMG test. The fidelity wasn't as high.
Okay, so inpainting lets you keep the rest of the image perfect. The cat is untouched.
Correct. Composition outside the mask is maintained flawlessly.
But inside the mask, you risk poor integration, weird blending artifacts, and maybe lower quality or fidelity for the change itself. It doesn't see the forest for the trees.
That sums it up perfectly. It's a failure of global context.
So let's synthesize this. The classic compromise is stark. You use inpainting, you keep the composition perfect, but the change might look off or poorly done.
Right. Poor integration.
Or you use IMG to IMG, you can get a perfect high-fidelity change integrated beautifully.
But you risk completely destroying the original composition, the pose, the subject you wanted to keep.
We're stuck. We need a way to separate these two things. We need to somehow lock down the composition, the structural DNA, but leave the subject, the style, the colors totally free to change.
And that is exactly what brings us to the need for DDIM inversion, the advanced technique that lets us hopefully have our cake and eat it too.
The magic that rewinds time, or at least the creation process. Let's dive in. Okay, this feels like where things get significantly more complex, but also where the real power lies, right?
Absolutely. DDIM inversion is the breakthrough. It moves us past just dealing with compromises and lets us start demanding perfection, computationally speaking.
So let's start with the core idea, the fundamental theory. How does this actually work?
Right. So DDIM inversion is quite literally, it's a reversal, a computational reversal of the normal process.
What's the normal process again?
Briefly, we're all used to the forward diffusion process, right? You start with pure random noise, just static. And then, step by step, over maybe hundreds of steps, the AI gradually removes that noise, denoising it, until a clear picture emerges.
Guided by the text prompt.
Guided by the prompt, exactly. DDIM inversion just flips that entire script.
Okay, how?
Instead of starting with noise to make a picture, we start with the finished picture, the one we want to edit, and then we calculate, and this is the key part. The exact hypothetical noise that the AI would have used to create that specific image, we trace every single step backward in time mathematically.
Whoa. Okay, so we're not just adding random noise like MG to IMA.
Not at all. MG to IMG just throws new random noise on top. Destructive. DDIM inversion is about discovering the image's original specific recipe, its unique starting noise pattern.
You're finding the seed.
Or something like it.
Kind of like finding the exact seed, yes, but also the precise path taken from that seed. And crucially, this makes it fundamentally different from standard MG2 noise addition. It's not random, it's calculated. It's designed for recreation, using math that allows for perfect reversibility. Okay, hang on. That distinction sounds really important. Recreation versus reimagination. You're saying DDIM gives us a guaranteed path back.
Precisely, that's the core difference. Many popular samplers, like say Euler A, they're stochastic.
Meaning random?
They introduce a tiny bit of randomness or noise injection at pretty much every step of the denoising process, which is great. It adds texture, creativity, interesting variations.
Yeah.
But it means you can't perfectly trace the path backward. That randomness makes it impossible to reverse with mathematical certainty.
Okay, so how is DDIM different? What does the second D in DI stand for again?
Denoising diffusion implicit models. And the key is that DDIM relies on a deterministic process.
Meaning no randomness.
Essentially, yes. For the core path calculation, every step is mathematically calculated based on the previous step. It's fully reversible. We aren't guessing the starting noise. We are computing the exact sequence of steps back to that initial noisy state.
And that makes the inversion mathematically perfect.
Theoretically, yes, which is why the structure holds up so incredibly well.
Ah, okay. That clicks now. If you have the exact step-by-step roadmap for how the image was built.
You could follow that map backwards to the start, and then you can follow it forwards again, but maybe using different building materials, a new style, a new subject.
As long as you stick to the original structural path laid out in that map.
That is the absolute core concept. DDIM Inversion preserves what the source calls the absolute compositional soul.
The camera angle, the cat's paw position, the lighting.
All of it, because it has perfectly captured that underlying structural map, independent of the surface details.
Okay, this brings us to a term we hear thrown around a lot, especially in complex setups like ComfyUI, the latent space. What is that really? What are we saving when we save this noisy latent file?
Right, the latent space. It's probably the most magical term here, but it's actually quite concrete. Think of it as the AI's native language, or the image's compressed digital DNA.
So the final image we see is made of pixels, right? Red, green, blue values, millions of them. Yep, pixel space. Very high dimensional. But the AI doesn't think in pixels directly during the diffusion process. It works in a much, much smaller compressed space, the latent space.
It shrinks the image data down first.
Exactly. When the model first looks at an image or prepares to generate one, it uses an encoder part, like a VAE, variational autoencoder, to compress that huge grid of pixels into a smaller set of numbers, the latent representation.
How much smaller are we talking?
Significantly. A standard 512 by 512 pixel image has, what, over 786,000 values if you count RGB?
Yeah, something like that.
The latent version might be compressed down to maybe a 4 by 64 by 64 or 8 by 64 by 64 matrix. Way fewer numbers.
What gets lost in that compression?
Mostly the high-frequency noise, the really fine textures, the tiny color variations. What's left behind is the crucial stuff, the high-level semantic information.
Like the structure.
Exactly. The pose, the main shapes, the object placement, the lighting direction, the overall perspective, the core concepts of the infrastructure.
So the latent file isn't just a blurry picture. It's more like an abstract blueprint, decoupled from the fine details.
That's a great way to put it. A structural blueprint. So when we do the DDIM inversion and save that noisy latent, we're saving that blueprint, but in its initial noisy state, the perfect, unaltered recipe.
The image's structural DNA ready to be used again.
Precisely. The latent holds the structure. And part 2 of this whole process is where we get to change the style or content that gets painted onto that structure.
Okay, the theory makes sense. Structure locked in the latent. Now, how do we actually do this? Right, theory understood. We've decoupled structure using this reversible DDIM math and the latent space. Now, let's get practical. The alchemist's workshop, the source calls it, a 2-part process.
Yep. 2 distinct parts, 2 spells, if you like. And the key is the first part demands discipline, real engineering precision, to unlock the creative freedom in the second part.
Okay, let's start with part 1, the inversion spell. The goal here is just to create that special latent file, right? The recipe.
Correct. The workflow is often called DDIM deconstruct. Its only job is to take your starting image and generate that mathematically precise, noisy, latent representation of its structure.
And you said this requires real discipline. How so? Where's the tricky part?
It all comes down to setting up the K-sampler correctly. The K-sampler is the node or the engine that actually runs the diffusion steps. For inversion, it has to be configured in a very specific, non-standard way.
The source mentions 3 golden rules, non-negotiable rules for this step.
Absolutely critical. These rules force the sampler to act like a faithful map maker, just tracing the structure, not like a creative artist trying to make something new.
Okay, rule number 1.
Rule 1, you absolutely must use a DDIM sampler. We already touched on why, right? Reversibility.
Because it's deterministic.
Yeah.
No randomness to mess up the backward path.
Exactly. If you try to use a standard stochastic sampler like Euler A or DPM ++2 MSDE, they inject noise. That randomness breaks the perfect reversibility. You won't capture the exact starting noise. So DDIM uniform is the classic choice here.
Okay, makes sense. Deterministic sampler for a deterministic process. Now, rule 2. This one seems weird. You have to set CFG to 1.0.
Yeah, this is the one that trips people up. It feels completely backward.
Because normally CFG classifier free guidance, we set that higher, right? Like 7 or 8, to make the AI really stick to the prompt.
Right. High CFG forces strong adherence to the text conditioning. Setting it all the way down to 1.0 basically tells the model, ignore the prompt.
Wait, ignore the prompt during the inversion. Won't that just break everything? How does it know what structure to trace if it's ignoring the description?
Ah, see, that's the beautiful counterintuitive part of inversion. We are not asking the model to create anything based on the text. We are asking it to trace the structure that's already in the image data working backward.
Right.
If the CFG was higher than 1.0, the model would try to steer the inversion process based on the prompt text, trying to make the backward path somehow align with the words that would corrupt the pure structural trace.
So setting CFG to 1.0 isolates the process from the text.
Precisely. It forces the sampler to act purely as a calculation engine. It says, just look at the image data, follow the deterministic DDIM math backward, and ignore any conceptual guidance from the text. The prompt is just a necessary input for the node, but its influence is nullified.
Wow. Okay, so CFG 1.0 isn't about guidance, it's about removing guidance to ensure structural purity.
You got it. Maximizes the fidelity of the structural capture. And that leads directly to rule number 3, which is equally important.
Which is?
You must disable add noise or set noise addition to 0, depending on the interface.
Okay, this makes a bit more sense. In normal EMG to IMG, adding noise is how we start the change. Why disable it here?
Because, again, we're doing an inversion. We are calculating the noise recipe that already exists implicitly in the image structure, the noise it would have started from.
So adding new random noise would contaminate that.
Instantly. You'd be throwing random new ingredients into the recipe you're trying to meticulously uncover. We only want to compute the noise that's inherently part of this image's reverse path. Disabling add noise ensures we're working only with the pure original data's trajectory.
Okay, so DDIM sampler, CFG 1.0, no added noise. That's the strict recipe for part 1. And the output of this K-sampler run, that's our noisy latent.
That's the golden ticket, the noisy latent file containing the structural DNA.
How do you actually save this thing? It's not just a regular image file, is it?
No, definitely not. It's a complex data structure, that latent tensor. And this is where you usually need specific tools, often found in modular interfaces like ComfyUI.
Custom nodes.
Exactly. The source material specifically mentions needing a latent save node, and it points out that this kind of specialized node often comes from community-developed extensions, giving the was node suite as a common example.
Ah, okay.
That explains why people often need to install extra node packs. They provide these crucial utility functions that aren't in the base software for saving and loading these special latent files correctly.
Yep. They handled the serialization of that high-dimensional latent data. And there's one final, practical, almost manual step in part 1 that catches a lot of beginners out.
What's that?
The file you just saved, that .latent file or whatever format it uses, gets saved to your output folder. You usually have to manually move or copy that file into your ComfyUI input folder or wherever your latent load node expects to find it for part 2.
The physical handoff. You have to bridge the gap between the output of part 1 and the input of part 2 yourself.
It seems simple, but it's a common point of failure if you forget. Got to get that latent file ready for the next stage. All right, part 1 complete. We ran the disciplined inversion, saved our precious noisy latent file, and moved it to the input folder. Now for the fun part. Part 2, the recreation spell.
Exactly. DDIM reconstruct. This is where we actually use that blueprint to make our changes, knowing the composition is safe.
And you said this part is simpler and faster.
Generally, yes. The workflow loads that magical latent file we just prepared.
Using a latent load node, presumably.
Yep, often from the same suite, like was nodes. And it feeds that latent directly into a standard K-sampler for the forward diffusion process. Notice it doesn't need the original pixel image anymore.
Just the recipe, just the latent file.
And just the latent. That contains everything needed for the structure.
And the rules change now. Part 1 was strict discipline. Part 2.
Part 2 is maximum creative freedom, because the structure is already baked into that latent file. It's non-negotiable.
How does that work? How does the latent guarantee the structure?
Well, that latent file we created isn't just random noise, it's the specific noise pattern calculated via DDIM inversion that corresponds exactly to the structure of our original image. When the K-sampler in part 2 starts denoising from that specific latent, it's starting from a point that is hard-coded mathematically to unfold into that original composition.
So the path is set from the very beginning.
The structural path is set. This frees up the model entirely. It can focus 100% of its computational effort on interpreting the new prompt, applying the new style, generating the new textures, without ever having to worry about figuring out the pose or the camera angle. That's already fixed by the latent.
Okay, so now we can do the cool stuff that failed with MG2 IMG or inpainting, like What if the original cat image was made with an old, maybe slightly blurry AI model?
Perfect example. In part 2, you load the latent derived from that old image, but you connect it to a case sampler running a brand new, state-of-the-art, high-resolution model.
And the result?
The new model will generate an image that perfectly matches the pose, the lighting, the composition of the original blurry cat.
But rendered entirely in the new model's sharp, detailed, high-fidelity style.
Exactly. You can swap models seamlessly. It's incredibly powerful for upgrading old generations or doing precise style transfers while keeping the exact same composition.
And the prompt? We can finally change it drastically. No more cat conundrum.
Absolutely. The composition is locked by the latent. You are now completely free with the prompt. You could change it from the cat to, I don't know.
Epic, photorealistic fantasy portrait of a massive armored dragon resting on a pile of glowing rubies, looking directly at the viewer.
Perfect. And what you'd get is a massive armored dragon sitting in the exact same pose as the original cat, viewed from the exact same camera angle within the exact same overall composition.
That's wild. So the dragon adopts the cat's structural DNA.
Precisely. The composition, inherited from that latent, remains rock solid, as the source puts it. You can add lore as to change the style, use control nets for extra guidance on details, apply complex conditioning, all your creative tools.
Without any fear of the underlying structure collapsing or changing.
Zero fear. That's the power of separating structure from content. Part 1 locks the structure. Part 2 lets you paint anything you want onto it.
This really is the key. Isolation. Structure first, then creative freedom.
And the source material even mentions, briefly, a more advanced setup. A single combined workflow that does both the inversion part 1 and the reconstruction part 2 in one go.
Why would you need that? Isn't the two-step process powerful enough?
It is for most editing, but the combined workflow is really useful for diagnostic purposes or comparison work.
How so?
Let's say you're a researcher or just curious, and you want to see the real difference between, say, Stable Diffusion 1.5 and Stable Diffusion XL, fundamentally.
Okay.
You can run an image through this combined DDIM workflow. It inverts using one model setup, gets the latent, and then immediately reconstructs using the other model, all within the same process, using the exact same latent structure.
Ah, I see. Because the structure is guaranteed identical by the shared latent.
Any visual difference you see in the final output must be purely down to the inherent differences between Model A and Model B. Their unique styles, biases, texture handling, how they interpret concepts.
That turns DDIM inversion from just an editing trick into a really precise scientific instrument. A way to benchmark models on a perfectly level playing field, structurally speaking.
Exactly. It lets you accurately isolate and observe how different models render the exact same digital DNA.
Okay, let's pull back a bit and synthesize this. What does mastering this DDIM inversion technique really mean for you, the listener, the person trying to create or modify AI images?
I think the core value, the big takeaway, is that it fundamentally breaks that compromise we started with. That awful choice between creativity and fidelity that plagues standard IMG to IMG and inpainting.
Right. Those tools force a destructive choice. Keep the structure, sacrifice the change, or get the change, sacrifice the structure.
DDIM inversion offers a way out through, well, clever computational engineering. It gives you certainty. It allows for really seamless, non-destructive editing of the structure, enabling changes that were just impossible before without losing the soul of the original image.
So it changes your relationship with the AI, doesn't it? You're not just fiddling with a denoising strength slider anymore, hoping for the best.
Exactly. You stop being just a consumer of the tool, limited by its compromises. You start becoming more like an engineer, maybe a sorcerer, as the source puts it.
Capable of actually rewriting the image's digital DNA, mastering its creation story by manipulating that noisy latent.
And it also underscores why understanding the tools under the hood is becoming more important, moving beyond the simple web interfaces.
Yeah, you can't really do this stuff easily without getting into environments like ComfyUI, right?
Generally, no. The practical reality is you need that modularity. You need those specific custom nodes, like the was node suite mentioned, to handle the complex data, the latent saving and loading. It requires a bit more technical engagement.
But the payoff is this incredible level of control. High fidelity, high control.
It really is the pinnacle for that kind of work right now. DDIM inversion is more than just one technique. It represents a shift in thinking. You stop seeing images as just static pixels.
And start seeing them as dynamic recipes. Recipes you can reverse engineer, understand, and then perfect according to your own vision. And, well, That pretty much brings us to the end of this particular deep dive. We've gone deep into the engineering, the theory, the practice of DDIM inversion.
Yeah, we've really shown, I think, that sometimes the most powerful way to create isn't just starting from a blank slate, from pure noise.
Right. It's about mastering the ability to perfectly deconstruct something that already exists, trace it back to its origin, its structural blueprint,
And then re-engineer it, rebuild it with surgical precision exactly how you want it.
and mastering that process, that ability to capture and manipulate the digital DNA of an image, it leads to a really interesting, maybe even provocative final thought for you to chew on.
hmm If we can use DDIM inversion to take an image, perfectly capture its core structure in a latent.
And then change literally everything else about it, the subject, the style, the colors, the textures, while keeping that original compositional structure absolutely identical.
Does the whole idea of a single, unique, original image even make sense anymore in this age of generative engineering?
Yeah, what is the original? Is it the first set of pixels generated? Pixels we can completely change?
Or is the true originality tied to that underlying latent structure, that deterministic blueprint that we meticulously preserve and reuse?
And if you create, say, 1,000 different images, a cat, a dragon, an astronaut, all sharing that exact same latent structure, that same compositional DNA, which one is the original recipe? Does the concept even apply?
It's definitely something to think about. Where does originality live in a world where structure and appearance can be perfectly separated and recombined?
Food for thought indeed. A big thank you for bringing us the source material that spurred this fascinating dive into fidelity and digital alchemy.
Always a pleasure to explore the deep magic.
Keep learning, everyone. Keep questioning the tools, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.